The Irrational Confidence Podcast.
Hey, Fresh, let's kick it off. Our number 25 team coming in, rounding out our top 25. It is the Texas A&M Aggies. Mike Elko is back, second year over there. They were 8-5 last year. That opening game against Notre Dame, one of the better games in college football, one of the better defensive games if you're a fan of defense there. They got great O-line coming back. They got great rushing attack, arguably the nation's best rushing attack. We could make an argument there. They got a lot of great guys coming back there. And big-time transfer. Kevin Casey Concepcion, one of our favorite names, from NC State. Big-time receiver for him. They don't got much else other than him on the wide receiver spot. But what do you got for Texas A&M?
Well, I was on a fringe like 25 to 28, somewhere in that range the entire time I was
Right.
ranking them because, you did lose three very, very solid NFL players off the front seven in Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and Nick Scorton. The offense last year, Wagner was starting quarterback. Offense really didn't show much. Then Le'Veon Moss, he got hurt. The team kind of fell off there offensively. Marcel Reed did his best he possibly could to keep the offense moving, but they never really gelled. Colin Klein, I think the offensive coordinator, is going to have to really step his game up this year to make sure that Marcel Reed and that offense are ready to rock and roll. Reed, he showed flashes at times in the Auburn game and the Texas game, but they lost both of them. They just couldn't finish when it mattered. I want to see how they operate. Now, I mentioned Le'Veon Moss, big solid running back. They were 7-1 when he was in the lineup. When he got hurt with the season-ending injury, they were 1-4 down the stretch. So obviously you can't put it all on one guy as a running back, but he made a huge difference in that offense to give them some reliability, give them some way to manage down a distance, maintain drives, and finish in the red zone. If he can be healthy and they can mix in other running backs and give him some breaks, that'll help them go forward. But the passing game is going to have to really evolve. Reed, you mentioned Concepcion. Who else is going to be that number two, number three receiver who's going to really step up and give them a lift, give them some clutch plays on third down? It's really going to help. That's what they were lacking. If you watch the Texas game at the very end of the year, they were fighting for their lives. They had a chance of potentially being a SEC championship game participant, fringe playoff team even there at the end of the year. They just couldn't find a way to make a play down the stretch offensively to beat Texas. They had chances middle through the ballgame and kept thinking, all right, they're going to finally get it done. The defense was playing for their lives, but the offense just could not score. That's their biggest challenge coming into this season. They do return 4 stars on the offensive line, and they return 7 total stars on the defense. Mike Elko, defensive genius, I think is built for Texas A&M. He embodies the fan base. He embodies the culture. That team played fantastic defense under him with all the players they had gotten in there. If he can keep those guys, coach them up, get them to play, and build that depth on the defensive side, that puts, again, the focus on the offense. If they can really take that next step and move forward. Concepcion, you're got 2 years ago in the NC State team, he was really, really good. Last year, they had quarterback issues, injuries there. He never got it going. That entire team actually never got it going. If he can return to form of 2023, I think that gives them a big boost in the passing game and helps them win some ball games late when they were lacking last year. Their toughest 4-game stretch this year is October 11th when they host the Gators, 18th at Arkansas, November 25th at LSU, and then November 8th at Missouri. Outside of that, yes, they got to play Notre Dame, but if you can manage that 4-game stretch, somehow find a way to come 3-1 out of there, it puts you in a good spot. The Texas game at the end of the year obviously is going to be a big deal this year in Austin, but if you can somehow manage that stretch, beating Florida is it's not going to be impossible. I think they're a very good football team. They're going to be a lot better than they have been in the past, but that's not going to be an unreachable task coming in this game if they can play some solid defense. Arkansas, you never know what team you're going to face. LSU is always going to be a crazy battle. And then Missouri, I think Missouri's on a downward trend. So if you can come 2-2, 3-1 out of that stretch, you're probably in a good spot to, depending how that Notre Dame game goes, maybe have a thought of being on that fringe for a playoff spot. But you're going to have to get the defense playing consistently, and the offense is going to take that next step if they're going to want to see any kind of play of football in Aggie land this year.
Fresh, on my notes here, I have the running game can be possibly elite. This is a really good rushing attack, especially when you return 4 offensive linemen there. I like Amari Daniels a lot as a spellback, especially if Le'Veon Moss has some lingering rust maybe with that injury that he's got to come back from. You get spring or you get the fall camp to work that out and be back to 100%, but you never know with an athlete. You never know how well they're going to return. And you take a look at their schedule. Again, that Notre Dame game, is going to be one of the games that I think a lot of Aggie fans have circled. You got 2 games to get warmed up with UTSA and Utah State there. If Reed can push himself up to like a 65, 68% passer, I don't think he's got to get past that magical 70% mark for this team to be ridiculously good, but he's got to be better than 61%. And
Yeah,
he's going to
he's
be
got to mature.
right. He can rely on this running game, especially if Texas A&M can get a lead and they can run the ball and milk the clock. It's going to be a great thing for the Aggies here. I have a question for their defense, though. Just like you said, they lost 3 major players to the NFL draft last year, and 2 of those guys were very high draft picks. And I looked at it, and I was kind of shocked because Mike Elko's got a name for defense, and this defensive front only had 34 sacks last year. I feel like they need to, for them to really to take that next step, and A&M to be, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be in the same conversation as Texas and Georgia, who I think is the cream of the crop for the SEC this year. But for them to be in that conversation with Alabama, South Carolina, maybe Florida, let's see what they do here. I think that he's got to get to 39, 40 sacks right there. Somewhere that might be the sweet spot for that defense to get elite. Interesting to see what Patrick Payton does. Transfer from Florida State with them.
Hmm.
Good pickup there. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to be able to do in an Elko defense there. Interesting thing, though. Last year, against the spread, 3-10. This was not a great team to take against the spread.
No.
Interesting thing with them because of how they're going to run the football and play defense this year. Those numbers should stay low. Again, if you're seeing double outside of games against like Utah State, UTSA, but if you're looking at games against like Arkansas and Florida and that spread is in the double digits, I'd actually would, avoid these games from that perspective. Worst case scenario for me, I see them 8-4, 10-2 at best. Again, I'm with you on that stretch almost. We are just slightly off. I have it starting October 18th, traveling to Fayetteville, Baton Rouge after that on the 25th. They're off a week. Then they got to go to Columbia, Missouri, and then finish it up with, they finally get back to Kyle Field. South Carolina comes into town. That's a tough road to hoe there. 3 road games, and then you get at home with South Carolina, who I think is going to be a very, very good football team. If they can go 2-2 in that stretch, or 3-1, hopefully, then this could be a magical year for the Aggies.
Yeah, and especially by bringing the defense there. York and Scooby Williams at linebacker, they've got to take their game to the next level. They're studs there, but they've got to really elevate that to lead this defense. And that secondary is going to be tested because these teams now, Arkansas and Florida especially, they're going to be spread teams. And if they're going to play South Carolina, they're going to spread them out as well. These guys are going to be able to run and hold the field at linebacker and in the secondary to really help that pass rush get home. I think the ceiling for this team is 9 wins. Just because that schedule is
Really?
loaded, I don't. 10 is going to be very, very tough. You just rattled off every team they have to play, and then you have Texas on top of that. Plus, we have Notre Dame. Like
Yeah.
8 is probably the sweet spot, but 9 is probably that ceiling. If they pull off 10 wins, Mike Elko should get SEC Coach of the Year.
Is this a playoff team?
No, I don't think they're a playoff team at 9-3. 10 wins, they would have. That's the only way they can get in. I I
No,
have a
that's fair.
feeling that off Marcel Reed is going to have to grow up a lot to get to become a playoff team.